There is help out there for family businesses. They are not freaks. They're not circuses. They're not disasters. They're really smart, capable people who actually support the backbone of the economy.
Amy Wirtz, Senior Consultant at the Family Business Consulting Group, Exit Planner of the Year, and a trusted guide for multi-generational family enterprises. Amy's on a mission to help families protect their legacy, define their purpose, and build governance systems that keep both business and relationships strong. With decades of experience as a lawyer, mediator, and facilitator, she helps owners navigate the tough conversations about power, voice, and money without tearing the family apart. In this episode, Amy takes us inside the real world of succession planning, where emotion meets strategy, and shares how to turn leadership transitions into opportunities for growth, unity, and long-term success.
They are a little bit different, and their uniquenesses are a burden and an opportunity and a very beautiful thing. And there are people that can normalize the hard stuff they're walking through.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to Your Next. I'm your host, Jerome. And when I tell you we've got a great guest today, you better put your seatbelts on, buckaroos. We're going to outer space. I've got Amy Wirtz with me. She's a thought leader in the space. She knows all things family business. And today, we're going to talk about transition in the family business. Amy, so good to be with you. Thank you for taking time to hang out with me.
Thanks, Jerome, for offering this opportunity to me. I really appreciate you.
So Amy and I were hanging out at the Exit Planning Summit, and I'm walking through and I'm looking at the names on the wall. And I see this name that keeps coming up over and over again. I'm like, who is this lady? And then I happen to sit next to her at a table, and Renee Russo walks over and says, "Hey, do you know Amy?" I was like, "Well, I just met her," but she was like, "No, do you know who she is?" And I'm just sitting there in awe at the things that she's been able to do to move exit planning forward. And so this is a real honor and a treat for you guys because you're getting an opportunity to hear from somebody who's been in the space for longer than most of you people have known exit planning is a thing, and somebody who's got a depth of experience that not only goes from like how long she's been doing it, but a breadth. And so when you think about family businesses, you think, oh, well, we're just going to give it to the next generation. Amy's going to share a bunch of thoughts around that. And so, Amy, my first question is, when do most people think about exit planning when it relates to a family business?
I think they dream about it a lot. I mean, I think when people own a business and they have children, they dream about like how this could be an opportunity for their children. And based on how they did it, if they're a first generation, they romanticize it a lot. It's this great opportunity. If I built this, it's a gift, it's a hand up for the next generation. And it's also an ego-driven dream. Like, this is going to live beyond me and my kids will carry it and it'll be bigger than me. And so it's like a way for continuity of their impact in the community and in their industry to exist beyond their time on earth. So that's like an entrepreneurial view of it. If it is a second, third, or fourth generation, typically it's a very complicated dream of, yes, I can continue the dream of my elders, but depending on how well their transition worked, it can also be a bit of a nightmare and a lot of fear around doing it. And so I think that there's a lot that goes on in the owners' heads way before they get it out of their mouth, and they talk about it with the next generation. Most of the time, these conversations are triggered by a lawyer, a tax accountant, maybe non-family members going, "Oh my God, you're 75 years old. Am I going to have a job when you die? And what does this mean for the community?" But a lot of times it's when we start talking about our demise and what will happen with our assets that these conversations happen, especially for entrepreneurs going to second gen. For second, third, and fourth gens, there's usually some sort of rhythm to the concept of succession, and that's consultant speak. rhythm to ownership handoff and leadership handoff, right? Like lawyers and accountants always say it's succession planning. Well, for business owners, it's about power, voice, and money and their dreams.
Power, voice, and money. We got to go deeper, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't think people have summed it up that way. I've not heard those three words put together as it relates to business ever. So let's go to power first.
Okay. So inside of ownership is power to lead. So power in our society, often in families, is a bad thing. We don't want a power imbalance. We don't want people to have more power than others. It's around the concept of fair. But the reason ownership is really hard to talk about is because it is about power, which comes with ownership. So power and voting are connected. When you own, you vote, right? You have a say, and depending on the kind of ownership you get. But in most family businesses, they don't have different kinds of classes of stock. And so some businesses have voting and non-voting stocks, and that's a way to balance power. And that's the way families talk about, if you work in the business, you have a vote. If you don't work in the business, you can own, but you don't have a vote. Those are non-voting shares. So there are different ways families do that. Some families say everybody owns equally. Everybody has an equal amount of vote and an equal amount of voice. And some families say, nope, if you want to vote, you're going to work here, right? You can have a voice, you can have an opinion, but you don't have the power to move it. You just have a say. So we spend a lot of time with families distinguishing power and voice. So there are a lot of people who can have a voice. So emerging owners can have a voice, those next gens, about whether they're going to, if the company is going to go in a new direction, and they can say, yeah, I'm willing to shepherd that during my lifetime, or I think this is a really bad idea. I think you're making a mistake. But the people with the votes have the power to make the decision. Does that make sense?
It does. I think of power as control, right?
And it is. And
many times when we're talking to folks, when we're doing private equity deals, the question is, do you want control or don't you? And if you do want control, are you willing to step in as an operator? Because otherwise, having control but not being willing to operate if you need to make a change is a recipe for disaster, because the person that's operating doesn't always feel empowered when somebody else has the voting control and the final say on what happens or doesn't happen.
And in my world, that comes up a lot in sibling groups, because you might have 5 siblings that are the next generation of owners, and 2 of them work there and 3 do not. One might be the CEO, one might be head of sales, right? And 3 other members are doing other careers, and they don't even live close by. So the 2 that are putting the sweat equity in want control because they're there. Parents say, oh, no, 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 no. We treat our kids equally. Everybody has equal, because equal is an easy, concrete way to show fairness from a succession standpoint when you're talking about gifting, because 90% of the businesses in the United States that are family owned are gifted. And the reason it's gifted is because of our tax system. And when you get your shares inside of a gifting program that occurs either during lifetime or death, they're exempt from capital gains if it's under a certain rate, right? So a lot of the advice that family owners get is based upon tax advice, not upon the other factors that we talk about with families, which is voice, vote, money, expectations, leadership skills, qualifications, and where does governance fit in all that, right? So that's why we break it down to subjects that are relatable no matter how much business acumen you have and whether you're working in the business or not. And so that's why we talk about power, which is what you're talking about, which is don't have to do 1%, you don't have power. But in sibling groups, is it one person that's going to have all the power? Is it multiple people? Is it a collection? So are 2 people working there going to own 51% and they have to stay united in that vision? Is everybody going to have equal shares, which quite frankly, probably 75% of the businesses I see, the siblings have equal because the parents couldn't have hard conversations.
Mhm. So it sounds like equal isn't a best practice.
I think the best practice is to have the conversation. That's the best practice. If the grantors, the gifters, or the sellers determine that equal is the way that this cultural impact in their family is going to occur, and that's what it's going to be, then you have to have systems in your shareholder agreement, and you have to have the work to create the alignment so that everybody's rowing in the same direction. And we use family councils or family meetings, we use shareholder meetings, and we use board governance to help that happen. A lot of education, intentional time on education, intentional time on conversations, communication flow from the business to the ownership group to the family must be done to keep that ship going in one direction instead of having 7 people rowing in 7 different ways.
Mm. That scattering of attention or effort is the thing that I think ruins many businesses when they transition
Yes.
from one generation to the next. So we talked about power. Let's
Mhm.
talk about voice next.
Yeah. So there's something that we teach a lot at FBCG, and that is due process and people following decisions is based on transparency in a process where people have input that they understand. So their input is either a voice or a vote. So we set out and we say, okay, we're going to talk about a dividends policy or a distribution policy today. And the ownership group and the leadership group is going to understand that the ownership says that there shall be 25% of net operating profits distributed above and beyond taxes when profit reaches, I'm making this up, $500 million. Okay. 25% will be above and beyond tax distributions. So if you have voting shares, you get to vote on that. If you don't have voting shares or you don't even own yet, but you're being included in this conversation to create these policies, right? There's going to be a conversation about what does distribution policy look like? Why do we establish it? What's the purpose of it? What are you worried about? Like from retaining enough money in the company for growth and strategic plans? What are you worried about people becoming dependent upon these distributions and not working? How do they work? How are they, like sometimes we have very young adults owning because of gifting programs set up by estate lawyers and tax people. So what does that mean for them? When will they know that they're getting money? How will it be held? All that stuff. So there are some people that don't really have a vote, but they have questions. And we need to arm them with information and make sure that their concerns are addressed before people vote that actually have the power. It's very intentional. It's a lot of work. And once they know that we were going to create these policies in X system, whether it's the ownership system, the leadership system, or the family system, where they fit and whether they have a vote or a voice, and they understand how decisions are going to be made. That's all process questions. And when they understand the process and they understand where they fit in the process, they'll follow the decision. If decisions are made behind a closed door in a vacuum with 2 people, and then it's granted from high down, you're going to have a lot more complaints.
Yeah, I think that's where you have the biggest challenges is those complaints, especially if it's equal shares, because those folks can keep you hostage, right?
They
They
can.
can prevent things from moving forward, and sometimes that suffocates the business to a place where it can no longer operate. So, all right, we did control or power, we did voice or vote. Now let's talk about money. Because I mean, that's what it's all about, right? It's all about the money. I don't think it is, but many people think it is. So,
Well, so here's what my families say. Family businesses, now I'm making a huge broad stroke here, right? So keep this in mind. This is an average, not a absolute. Most of the family businesses I work with, money is part of the equation, but it's not the biggest part of the equation. I mean, I'm working with a 4th generation family business right now, going from siblings to cousins. They don't even like to call themselves owners because they don't want to be different than their employees. They don't want to be higher than their employees. They don't talk about ownership. They talk about leadership. The historical use of money in this business is to reinvest everything above and beyond salaries and taxes back into the business. They live very middle class, upper middle class lives, not rich lives. They're in a smaller community. They're very humble people. And it's almost taboo to talk about the benefits of money from owning this business. It's all about giving back. And in this family, the culture is about you work for your money. You don't get money just because you're an owner. But they have a very healthy exit program for generations. People have left and come, and they got that down. They got a shareholder. They have an awesome shareholder agreement. What they haven't gotten their heads around is that it is now not just one business, it's 5 businesses. They actually own a family enterprise, and the next generation has to think very differently and be much more strategic around how they run their businesses. And the next generation wants dividends. They want money above and beyond working 40 hours a week or 80 hours a week, right? It's going to be a very different culture. Money is viewed differently by this generation. They expect a rate of return, and they expect something above and beyond their salaries. Money is a very different cultural thing happen between generations, and it's a very uncomfortable transition for this family.
Well, and I would expect that that is probably more normal for second, third, 4th generation than it is for first. Like many of the patriarchs and matriarchs have risked everything to make the thing work. And maybe second generation saw it, but usually they were young when the parents were making the thing come together. And so didn't fully understand the sacrifices in order to make it be what it is. But second and third, I feel like, it's always been that way. We've always been well off. We've always been able to go on the trip to the thing, and maybe there's a boat or maybe there's a plane, maybe there's something, right? And the enjoyment was prioritized instead of the grind. So,
I think that's a really good summary, what you just said. And I'm going to add a but. Depends on industry. So when you're in an industry that makes things, widgets, electronics, it's manufacturing of some sort, that's a pattern I see. And I deal a lot in the hospitality industry. So in the hospitality industry, there are a ton of operating owners, and they transition ownership in an operating owner standpoint over and over again. And if Gen 1 built in a hospitality industry, Gen 2 usually expands, and they are like a second generation of entrepreneurs. So they might take one restaurant or one hotel or one campground and turn it into 5, or a campground plus a golf course plus a zip line business plus whatever it is, right? Or they might grow their RV campground from 100 sites to 300 sites, composing of 50 cabins, plus RV, plus tents, plus an event space that's weddings. See what I mean? Like and all that is still a huge grind and hustle because they're still operating owners. And that transition of the grind has a lot to do with what industry it's in and how much growth that next generation does. And is it growth by non-family leaders and just family strategic, or is it growth by operating owners and more family members owning the operation of each new line? And that's where families are so dang dynamic, because they can either use family members to go out and start new lines and new businesses. And now it becomes that family enterprise system we talk about. It's SEPA versus a family business. And that is where that money changes culture, right? I think if it's operating or first entrepreneur generation, building a manufacturing plant, building something, right? That is a something that can churn out work without those owners being there daily, it moves exactly in the pattern you're talking about. When you're in an industry where it needs humans to chug along and not machines, I see that grind continue. And I see the family demanding that family is there in the grind. And this next generation has no respect for the grind. Not in my world, not that I see. They'll work 40 hours, they'll work smart, they'll work hard, smart, but they're not going to be at a business 60 hours a week. That is not their vision of success.
That vision of success is something that's really interesting. And so one of the things that I often talk about is there's only three ways out. You close it, you give it away, or you sell it.
Right.
And you introduced a very interesting stat that I hadn't heard before, which is 90% of family businesses are given to the next generation. How do the givers or the grantees retire in that
It is a
space?
huge problem. You have just hit the nail on the head with the biggest hammer we have to deal with and get bumped up against all the time, Jerome. That is a huge problem. And it's a problem from three places. One, trust. Two, identity. Three, money. And there are lots of that, right? So when you work in the identity space a lot, like what is their identity as they transition? What will be the next chapter of their life? How do they stay relevant? Huge part of this conversation. And money is a huge part of it. So it is not hard when the businesses are throwing off a large number of dividends or rents that can be used to sustain their future life. If the business has always reinvested their earnings into growth, there's two problems. One, they're hooked on growth, and walking away means their drug of choice will be cut off from them, which is grow. I mean, like people get addicted to grow. They get addicted to the gamble of growing. And two, how are they going to support their lifestyle if they're not earning a salary or the benefits from the business? And three, can this next generation, can I trust them with my biggest asset? How do they work? What is their vision? When are they ready? When am I ready? Like this is a huge part of the work that we do in family business consulting. Yeah.
So, no. So this is juicy, right? I think, and it's just a thought, right? Well, maybe it's more than a thought. Let's call it a thesis. My thesis is that matriarchs should sell their company to the next generation so that they don't have to deal with those three things. They bought it, they can do what they want, and if they're successful, great. But they're not going from zero. And we could sell it at a price that either we own or finance it, or they go get debt from somewhere to support the sell. But whatever they do, I actually am work optional. I don't have to worry about whether you continue the thing or not, because the business gave to me what, for all intents and purposes, I needed it to give to me for the commitment and sacrifices that I made over the 15 to 50 years that I worked in it. And you actually have the freedom to do with it what you want, because it's not a gift, it's something you bought. And I just feel like the level of ownership Maybe that's a play on words, but I feel like the level of ownership changes pretty dramatically when there's a true transfer through with financial consideration.
I can't agree more. I think that a purchase of some sort, it would help a lot of the problems that we deal with inside of family businesses, in the sense of it gives an income stream for those that need to retire. Two, it helps the next generation make it theirs. It's not like they're shepherding their parents' gift. I think that you feel differently about stewardship when something's given to you than when you purchase it. And number three, I think it transfers the intellectual process of, I am leading and owning this. It is an act that is one of respect, not one of gifting. So I agree 100%. I will say to you, I don't think that's going to happen under the tax structures of this country.
So we still have the struggle though, right? Because the parents truly aren't work optional in that first generation, typically, if they don't sell it.
So what I see a lot, Jerome, is what I call legal deferred compensation plans and just family social compensation plans. So I work with one family. Actually, I work with 3 families right now, where there wasn't a purchase, there was a gifting program and an agreement to pay that person their salary for a certain number of years to help them with their retirement planning. So family businesses often say, okay, grandpa is going to transfer stocks to a trust. And when he dies, those stocks will go to us directly. But for the lifetime of the trust, dad's going to vote those shares as a trustee. The grandkids get the dividend benefit from it, right? Unless 1 or 2 may be working in the business. And grandpa's going to get his health insurance and his salary of, name a price. I've seen $30,000 a year. I've seen $50,000 a year. I've seen $500,000 a year until he dies. And that's how they buy the shares. But they're not doing a transaction that causes taxation in a capital gains manner for the owner of the shares. Instead, they're putting the shares in a trust, which protects it from the capital gains, which is totally legal. They enter into a family agreement to pay him a salary for a certain number of years. And lots of times they go those agreements and eventually grandpa's like, I really don't need this money. You can stop paying me. I have plenty of money. I'm fine. But at least for the first 10 years, grandpa can't walk out without knowing he has a salary. He just mentally can't do it. It's not factual. It's not based in reality. It's a mental thing. It's an emotional thing.
That just baffles me that they want to connect and continue to be connected to one stock. Like diversification at some point becomes important. Like I was sitting in a room with a group that does import export, and they actually have a glass cutting business and they import everything from France.
Cool.
And they just got destroyed with the tariff changes. Like,
oh, I bet.
negative.
I bet.
Negative for the year. And, there's other divisions. So the hope is the other divisions can bring the company neutral for the year, but negative for the year. And uncomfortable making any more sales because things can change so dramatically in the 30 days it takes from something getting loaded on the boat to the boat getting to the east or the west coast, depending on wherever they're sending it. And the thought that your business can go under in 24 months and all of your money still tied there because 80% of their wealth is usually wrapped up in the business. It just baffles me, the thought that you wouldn't want to pull it out and diversify. And maybe they did a good job of saving along the way with their salary, but many founders I know don't save well because they're putting it all back in the business. They're addicted to growing the enterprise.
it is a very different mindset when you haven't grown up in it. From the outside, it looks a little neurotic and a high risk. But I'll tell you, when I sit down and someone's looking at leaving their company and selling their stocks to the next generation, or maybe they're selling it to a third party, the statement I hear over and over and over is this follows. My average rate of return on my investment in a company over the lifetime of my ownership has been 17 to 24%. I cannot make that in the market. Why would I take my money and put it somewhere else?
I completely agree with them. They're going to get a better return, but it doesn't
It's a
account
high
for their
risk.
sweat equity, right? Like they're going to get a lower return if somebody else is doing the work.
And they have a
That's
real hard time with that. I mean, I would say to you that depending on what stage of development the family and the company's in, they only trust their family with their money because they've done well. Now, if recently, like COVID has occurred, and they understand the outside forces that impact the bottom dollar, right? And that can change your industry, they're usually more open to looking at harvesting money and putting it somewhere else.
but they had to experience the negative impact first.
Yeah.
Mm.
And it's funny when I go back generations. So one of the beautiful parts about being in a family business is when something new happens, when a COVID happens, right? If it's been owned for 70 years, I can say to the family, I know this feels like a crisis, but let's look at a timeline of what your business has walked through in the past and try to find the stories and resilience and methodologies your previous family members did to get through that storm. Because if you own this for another 70 years, COVID will be a blip. It won't be the end of the story. So what did our previous generations do to weather recessions, to weather unexpected disease processes like the Spanish flu or whatever it was that shut business down for a while? What did we do in a recession? What did we do the last time tariffs were here? Because we have had other presidents use tariffs. It's been a while, but some of my businesses were around during that time. And if those people are still here or leaders are still here, or we have books like financial books, we can go back and look. Did they freeze growth? Did they lay off people? Did they change what they delivered? You know, the cool thing about family businesses is when you can look over a period of time, you can watch them expand and decrease, expand and decrease, right? And there is like a rhythm that can be found in that work. And that's one of the benefits of family companies. They last longer than publicly traded companies usually. The leadership is there longer. And so that history can be used to say, we did this and it worked, or we did this and it didn't work, so we're not going to repeat it. And that's what's neat about family businesses.
Now, I think there's some stat out there like 65% of businesses are owned by baby boomers right now, and they got to transition, something like that, around a silver tsunami. Are you finding that the next generation isn't interested in running the business as the people dreamed of when they started building?
I think that, you know, and this is really changing. The last EPI owner survey, that the nationwide one that came out 2 years ago now, it is much higher percentage of people wanting to do a family transfer than there was in 2013 when they did it. I think that based on the employment market of today, what is and was not available for those kids that are graduating college or going off and working for 2 or 3 years, they're going to be coming home and knocking on the door and saying, you know what, if I'm going to work, I want to build something that I can build value in instead of working for someone else. I'm hearing that a lot right now. I'm also hearing parents saying, oh, shit, you know, people are getting laid off right and left. I need to bring this intellectual property back. It's also hard to find good employees. And I need to bring the family back in the fold to help run the business because it's hard to find people and it's hard for them to find good matches out in the regular world. And I see people folding in and bringing people home.
So people are coming back to the business when in the past they were going away.
Yeah. And I've seen that more in the last 2 years.
This
And I don't
desire,
know that. I think that is where you run into what you talked about. What's the vision of work? How do they define work? And is this generation matching the expectations of the current owners?
I don't know that I've met a parent that didn't feel like their kids were lazy.
And, when you get down to it, I think some of that is because this generation has different tools to work from than when I started working. Work can happen remotely a lot, so you don't watch them work. So when I helped owners describe lazy, I say, what are you talking about? Help me understand your version of work. And a lot of it is, well, they don't get here at 7:30 in the morning and leave at 7 at night like I do. And I'm like, well, they have little babies. They're freshly married. They have teens that are in team sports. And I said, how long has it been since you've had that? Oh, like 30 years. And I said, when you had that going on, did you go home and do things? And a lot of that depended on the sex of the person I'm talking about. If it's a female, yes, they did. If it's a male, they had a wife that did it for them and they don't understand the drill.
So, in priority is different too. I would suspect are if they watch their parent do that, they're like, well, I don't want that for my kids. I'm not going to be that, right? They're learning the lesson of what not to do from the example.
But they're also very creative of working. So they might leave the office at 3:30 in the afternoon and go pick up their kids and go to a basketball game or go to a swim lesson. But they start working again at 8 o'clock at night and they're working till 11 o'clock at night because we have these things called, virtual portals, and we do a lot on computers today and they can do phone calls later. They're hustlers. They just do it different.
Mhm. They do it different. To me, that's magical because there's not one way to get it done.
Unless you're 70 years old and you've done it that way your whole working life and you resist the concept that it can be done differently. And that's the tension I hold all the time with our families in transition.
Now, one thing I'm really curious about, and I know it's not core skill set for you, but you've been around it enough, so I'm curious about your perspective. We talked about this tax thing, right? They're trying to avoid capital gains in the sale, and so they're just going to draw salary until they pass away type thing. Like, does the math actually bear out that that's a more efficient or effective way to get that salary done?
So sometimes it does. I challenge the accountants to do the math. And I say, okay, I know instinctually you think this is less money, right? Well, let's do the math. Let's do the math on the employment taxes, which, by the way, employment taxes are some of the highest taxes in the United States. Capital gains is a lot less, right? So I asked the accountants and the deal constructors to do the math. And sometimes it is cheaper. A lot of times it's not. It's a misnomer.
That's how I felt, right? My gut was like, I don't know. And
But
then
here's the difference. So where the lawyers and accountants come back and say, on this generation, it might not be that it is going to work out the best. But once we start, so there's a step up in basis that occurs at death, or there is a step up in basis, or there's a basis freeze when you transfer the shares into an irrevocable trust, then all that growth grows tax-free. So there's a double focus on taxation. There's the taxation results that occur between the gifter and this next generation, right? But the next generation is the ones that really benefit on that transfer tax-wise. because they keep the process going. Becomes a cultural norm that you avoid the transfer of capital gains cost or transfer costs because you keep those things in this trust that goes from generation to generation, and you never really sell. So it's never happening. So it grows in value. Let's say generation 2 gifts the shares to a trust, and those shares are put in a trust. And then generation 3 does the same thing for their kids. And then generation 4 does the same thing for their kids. All that growth occurs and is transferred without capital gains taxes in each generation.
I get that. And
That's how they sell it, Jerome.
I
It's really
understand how
simple.
they sell it, right? And my counter argument on that, and Amy doesn't talk like an attorney, but she's an attorney. My counter argument for that is the ability to have options. So there's two things, right? The pension plans went away because of this very thing. The more people you add to the thing, the more burden it is. And so, yeah, it was great for one person to take a salary but not be working. But if they had 2 kids, all right, so now there's 2 people who are taking a salary and not working. And now you go down to the cousins, and now it's 8 people taking a salary and not working. And I'm not sure that the enterprise grew 8x at this
And that's the
point.
problem. And so this solution stops being viable. It really does. The bigger the group, the less viable it is. And that's why we teach that you have to normalize liquidity. You have to normalize that people are going to be offering their shares for sale because this isn't going to work long term. And that the ownership group will increase and decrease over time because of exactly what you pointed out. The bigger the group, the less likelihood that everyone's going to stay for their whole life.
Yeah, to me, that's magical. And then there's the diversification, or I'll call it liquidity, like the ability to just transfer it or move it. It's one thing. And it's the simplest example I have of this is when parents give kids houses or grandparents give grandkids houses. And many of them they don't know how to take care of it, right? And so that becomes a burden for them. It's not something they're interested in. It's just a building. Maybe they get a check every month. Maybe they don't. Maybe they don't care because there's no mortgage because they spent however long paying it off. Very similar to whatever the business is that's being passed from generation to generation. And then they're like, well, I could, if it's a $200,000 house, I'd rather have the $200,000 because that could solve a real problem for me right now. And yeah, you could go get a loan on it, but then you got to service the debt. And it's just like, well, if I just had the cash, then I could do this. Or I'm really passionate about this thing and I need an investor. Well, the company can't invest in you. Or maybe it could. But as a general rule, the company's not going to invest in it. The company's going to do what it's been doing. And so I just feel like the superior solution in every instance, in spite of taxes, is to sell it. And I don't know that I'm ever going to come off of that horse, but I get how they sell it.
So I think really good advisors educate their family groups on all options. Right? It can be gifted and bought. It can be sold to the next generation. It can be sold to the next generation in management. It can be sold to management. I mean, you need to teach them what exit options are and what the benefits and the negatives for all those options are. And then they're adults. You don't own their systems as a consultant or an advisor. They do. And they will make the decisions they make, and then you shepherd with them if you can. But the best practices is that you teach them their options.
Mm.
And for most family businesses, they don't even know all the exit options.
Because when they started, they had this dream that they were going to pass it down to the next generation. And now they've come to the place of passing it down to the next generation. And they just want to do that.
It goes back to their dream and the romanticizing the succession of a family business. And so, it's a fascinating journey I take with these families. And I meet the most intelligent, resourceful, kind human beings doing this work. I have a lot of respect for the families I work with. It's fun work.
So let's talk about that. Like, what do you do? Right? We've talked about the just broader scope of succession planning with families, but like, what is the nuts and bolts of how you support folks?
So my philosophy is very similar to the work that we teach at EPI in the SEPA program, which is first, there's a pain point, right? Or there's a reason to avoid a pain point. And so I'd say probably a third of the families I work with come in for preventative work. They know that their children are in their 20s, early 30s, and they're going to be coming to knock on the door, and they're going from sibling to cousins, and they want to prepare for cousins entering the business. That's like a want, right? That's one kind. The other kind can be they have nobody to take over the business, and what are they going to do with it? That's another pain point we service. The other one can be that there is an actual attempt at a transfer of ownership and power, and they've fumbled, right? No matter what generation they're in. And they come to us and say, this is where we're at in the process. In all three of those processes, the structure behind the work that we do is we do a discovery process and a listening tour first. And I spend time, anybody at FBCG spends time with the stakeholders. And those interviews can be an hour to 2 hours long. And we assess their systems for readiness of transfer. Where are they at? What's the health of the family system today? What are people talking about? What are they worried about? What are their dreams? Do they do fun together? Do they have family time together, or do they just fight? Right. And then we look at the ownership system and we assess it for readiness for transfer. What kind of documents do they have? I have a company that I'm working with that is, I would say, a very large company. And the only legal document they have is the original incorporation document from the 70s. That's it. And they've gone from non-family and family ownership to family ownership. And they're looking at five, like I think there's 6 or 7 siblings, and they don't have the structure behind it. And they're really good at running their businesses, but they don't understand the why of the foundation. So that's a transition issue. Then we look at leadership, and when we say, what's our leadership team? What's the age of our leadership team? What are the systems inside running the business? Are they working? Are we using software from 1970, or we have no software, or where are we at in advertising, marketing, contracting? What's the age of our leaders? Do we have a development of human capital or not? And then we give a report, and we call it a feedback report. But then from there, we build an action plan with the stakeholders in those systems, and then we help them implement it. I think the real magic behind the work that I do and the other consultants of the FBCG is that we stay with them in the implementation. We don't just hand them a report and go, okay, think it was nice meeting you. Go figure out how to do this. Right? If they could figure out how to do that, they wouldn't have hired us in the first place. Our time frame with families are pretty heavy for the first 6 months that we're involved. And then we start slowing down, and eventually we want to move to a process where a phone a friend. We empower them to do the work. We give them the skills. I don't believe in a consultant becoming an owner in the family business or part of the family. It's their business. They need to take ownership of the direction they want to go, and we need to empower them with new skills. They're smart people, or they wouldn't be owning this business in the first place. And respect what they know, open new doors for them for new knowledge, help them make a plan, help them start the process of implementing the plan, get them on the system of implementation, and then become dial a friend. It's kind of how we do it.
Wow. So, I mean, it's holistic, comprehensive.
And I don't
Most people-
usually do it alone. Usually there's a team.
Many consultants just want to give a report and run. It's kind of smash and grab.
And it's not how we work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're actually eating what was in the recipe.
Yeah.
So it's got to work, right?
Yeah. And, you know, there's a saying in our work, we can only move as fast as the people we're helping. And if they
Say
are
more about that, because I feel like many people don't have that level of patience. They want the outcome more than the people they're serving.
Yeah, it's a real struggle. And trust me, there are days I don't do well with this. I mean, I think it's a constant tension of being a consultant and working in complex systems, is that there will be people that want to move super fast in these systems and people that are very reluctant to do the work. And part of our job is to pace the work in a way that's digestible to everyone that has to make decisions, that has to do the work. So part of that is coaching the people that want to go really fast to slow down. Part of that is helping the people that are really reluctant to do the work find the buy-in and find a place and a voice so that they get excited enough to do the work. And then recognizing when people need to take a break and allowing them the break, and then having the system to restart.
The break. So you don't just hammer it through and force them through a process. Like,
That's my preference, but I have to work in the way that the system works. So when I'm working with farmers, which I do, I love working in agriculture. I know I'm not going to be working with them during planting and harvest. That's the break in my work with them. They're too busy. They have too many other things to process to do the work on the business at that point. They're in the business. So there's a break. I have a company I'm working with right now where about 85% of their annual earnings are made in November and December. So I know where I'm taking a break in November and December. It would be insane for me to have them working that hard and trying to work in these systems at the same time. It's a non-starter. That's what I mean about a break. If there's a death, if a baby's being born, we might have a little short break. You know, like give them time to process a change that was expected or unexpected, right? If I have a cadence of monthly work and there's been a death of a family member, we might skip a month because they need to process that inside the family system and inside the business system. But that is part of being a good change management consultant.
so we get to the end and you throw in a new term, change management. Most people have no change management approach, philosophy, framework, but you're helping them come in and in their transition, that's kind of baked in. And that new skill set, I think, is important for people to negotiate or navigate this uncomfortable process for sure.
Yeah.
The final question on this, Amy, is, we've covered so much ground. We've talked about things in threes throughout the process, whether it was power, voice, and money. Money seemed to come up in all the threes, but there were threes all over the place. What's the one thing you really want the listeners to take away from this episode?
There is help out there for family businesses. They are not freaks. They're not circuses. They're not disasters. They're really smart, capable people who actually support the backbone of the economy in the United States. They employ more people than publicly traded companies do. They last longer. Their leaders are there longer. But they are a little bit different. And their uniquenesses are a burden and an opportunity and a very beautiful thing. And there are people out there that want to help them succeed in creating more value for their families, their communities, their employees, preserve that value for future generations, whether it's in an operating business or if they incur a sale and it's creating a family office. And there are people that can normalize the hard stuff they're walking through.
There are people who can normalize the hard stuff they're walking through. To me, that's magic because I watch so many folks hide, like there's shame around any discomfort. They don't want anybody to be close enough to see the challenges that they're experiencing or, see that their kids aren't stellar, right? Great leaders or of the same cloth that they are. And they're trying to shield that from the world. And so this was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us, Amy.
Thank you.
I think so many folks are going to benefit from this, and it's going to give them hope, right? Because you can become pretty distraught when you spent 15 to 50 years working on something. You're ready to go to the next generation, or you're tired, you're ready to be out. You think the next generation is the answer because that's the way you drew it up in the dirt when you got started. And now you've got some hiccups, you got some challenges, and you don't know what to do with them. And you don't have the tools. You don't even know where to turn. It's good to know that professionals like you are out there ready to help serve and create the outcome that they dreamed of. So
It's
thank you
fun.
so much.
It's really, really, thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate you, Jerome. And you do great services for people. And you do a lot of things I don't do, which is the professional coaching and identity change and the what next chapter in depth with individuals one-on-one. I work from a system. You work with one-on-one, which is a very different dynamic than what I do. So I'm really glad there are people out there that do the coaching that you do to help people actually make the changes I talk about them needing to make.
Well, hopefully we can do a lot of stuff together in the future, Amy. This
Yeah.
was phenomenal. To our listeners, your dreams should be real. We'll catch you on the next episode.